What's up YouTube, Dell here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you my first place local branded Despia profile. That's right, we've gone back to basics, no longer using illusions or the Chimera package. We are going back to the old school branded. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. The deck took on Vanadium, Crystal Beast, Trap Tricks, and the mirror match and came out unscathed on the other side. So we started off with triple Fallen of Albaz, put in a lot of work actually having it free. It kind of made me a little bit happier when I was discarding this card off of other card effects, and preview I was main decking Super Poly, which put in enough work to justify its inclusion for the local environment. For the rest of the Albaz kind of cards, we were playing 2 Cartesia and 1 Quim. Pretty straightforward and simple on these one. They just do the job that they are sent to do. I then still played the 1 Macoria and the 1 Albion. It's quite nice getting access to your Ringbroom from the deck off of Branded Fusion. I didn't actually go down that route at any point, but being able to search this off and having the negate in the hand did put in a lot of work, which is really, really nice and effective. And then the Albion dump and draw I used a couple times, probably more times than I should have done, but being able to get either a Branded Lost in the Graveyard for another preview card that I was playing of Branded Beast, but also trying to set out Retribution to recycle the cards from the graveyard was invaluable. Then for the Despia lineup, I was playing triple Aluba. It was nice to have this back at free because obviously in the Chimera version or the Illusion version, whichever one you want to call it, you kind of rely less on Aluba being a normal summon and go kind of monster, and it was quite nice to take it back to that, and it did work out incredibly well. I saw this more than Branded Fusion, but more times than not it did resolve successfully, and that was what allowed me to kind of push through games and get where I needed to go. The 1 Tragedy and the 1 Adlib. Adlib still put in a lot of work for the deck, so I was quite happy to maintain it. There was a couple of times where I had to fusion it, use its effect, and bring back a Mirror Jade, which worked out very, very nicely. Then for the Bestials, I'm still playing them in this version. I was playing the 1 Lubellion, the 1 Magnemute, and the 1 Saronir, with, of course, the 1 Branded Beast. Now, Branded Beast actually put in a lot of work for me, especially in certain matchups like the Vanadiums, because it caused my opponent to have another card they needed to worry about. The way that I kind of looked at it was, well, Branded Lost is only so good. Like, by the time you get Lubellion into the graveyard, unless you hard open it, you're probably going to be sending it off of Branded Fusion. Which means you've already gone past your 2 fusion stages before you can get to your Branded Lost. Now, obviously, it's better if you then have a Cartesia or a Branded Red or another card that will allow you to fusion summon to then gain the advantage off of the Branded Lost. So I kind of went with Branded Beast. Now, it's not as if I was playing Beast instead of Lost, I was playing both of them. But what worked out really nicely is if I was then able to get to Saronir, Saronir could then Foolish Burial the Branded Lost, and I could get it again off of the Beast, setting that up the play. Now that's obviously if you didn't want to go down the Retribution route to kind of recycle some of your resource, and again, it worked out really, really nicely. Now the Bestials themselves are down to local environment dependent, in my opinion. Some local environments just have no effect against the Bestials whatsoever, and some really do flop against them. So like the Vanadiums, if you hit the right card with the Bestials, you can cause a lot of issues. But in the Crystal Beast matchup and technically the Mirror match isn't that great because, I mean, you hit their Fallen of Albaz, which is great. But then if they're going in for a Lubellion, they're just going to spin it back anyway. And then, of course, the Trap Trick matchup is with no use. So apart from just keeping Lubellion, Beast, and then the Saronir, I would easily side out the Magnemute. And if I felt that this entire engine was of no use to me whatsoever, it was a very easy 4-card side out. So it made life a little bit easier when it came down to that period, and it did put in a lot of work, or enough work for me to be happy and satisfied with it. For the hand traps, again, local dependent on this, adapt this what you see fit, but I went with Ash and Imperm. Imperm actually put in a lot of work for me. You'll see it in one of the duels where this actually ended up winning me a game. So I was actually really happy with the use of the Imperm. Ash, again, if you feel that your Draw and Lockbird is going to be more effective in the main for you than Ash, then very easily take it out. It all comes down to local environment. You can either go for more board breakers, you can go for more hand traps in a certain sense, but these just worked out very easily. Speaking of board breakers, I decided to go with triple Forbidden Droplet and triple Super Poly. Now, the Super Poly, again, is down to local environment for how consistent it is. I definitely feel it's a great card for the format and can very easily go into the side deck. But for me, at the local environment, I was like, right, okay, well, I kind of expect to be facing Vanadiums because that was quite highly represented. I was expecting it to be represented, which is why I main decked it. I only saw it once or twice, but it did its job. And then Forbidden Droplet was just one of the ones where I was like, well, Dark World No More to me is not that great if I go first. I kind of want that board breaking option with the boards being produced of, okay, I'm going to go into Calamity and skip your turn, or I'm going to go into Baron plus another negate, or Baron plus Dispata. You wanted more cards that allowed you to cause your opponent issues, and Droplet was just one of them options. I really did like it, especially when you're looking at stuff like, okay, well, triple tactic talents, where you need your opponent to do something to gain advantage. Droplet gave you that ability to go, okay, cool, normal summon Aluba, activate Effector Search, chain Imperm, chain Droplet, still get my resolution, and I've been able to negate one of your monster effects. So really, really good, put in a lot of work, and I really did enjoy it. Then for the standards, triple fusion deployment, triple branded fusion, triple branded opening. Pretty much, like, unless the ban list says so, you're always going to be playing 3 of this card. Triple branded opening, put its work in, and then 1 lost, 1 red, 1 retribution. All relatively straightforward and stand on that one. I don't think any other build would play that much differently. Maybe red is the one that's in question, but especially if your locals is bestial heavy, like that's when Brandon Red really sucks, because you'll go Brandon Red and they'll go chain of bestial. So give and take, you adapt it as you see fit. I mean, if Expulsion comes back, that's definitely a card you highly consider putting back into the deck. But I still don't think Expulsion can come back, in my opinion, because unless they're going to go, all right, we're going to ban Ra's Disciple, Ido the Supreme, and Gimmick Puppet, which is 3 cards for the price of 1, it's not really going to be that good. Moving on to the extra deck for the Albaz fusions, we've got double Mirror Jade, of course, double Albion, and then 1 Lubellion, 1 Rimbram, 1 Sanctifier, 1 Titaniclad. Now, I was relatively happy with this lineup. There wasn't really anything massively I was missing from this, so this lineup pretty standard. I quite like the inclusion of Titaniclad. It was a nice little way of being able to kind of attack over higher attack monsters, but also being able to send it to give me access to the Quem was really important. Got the 1 Dust Dragon and the 1 Lulu Walif. The only card throughout my entire extra deck that I did miss was Quinteris. I just like that option of getting to it, because it does put a little bit more fear back into your opponent, because there's that times where you're like, okay, cool, activate Quinteris, reduce all your monsters to 0, and it pretty much allows you to survive that additional turn. Especially in a Tratrix matchup as well, if I had that, I could have returned all my opponent's monsters to 0, and I could have just attacked, and especially when they've got Garden, they can't be destroyed by battle once per turn. Or even if they have Reflesia on the board, it just makes it even harder, and you just go, okay, cool, attack my big boss monster into your 0 attack, attack my second big boss monster into your 0 attack, and you've pretty much pushed through game, and technically attack directly without having to clear them off the board. For the Super Poly targets, of course, I went with the 1 Garura, the 1 Mud Dragon, the 1 Draxistapelia, and then I did have the Dragon Knight, purely because I was expecting Manadiums. If you're not expecting Manadiums, that is your Quinteris. So that is definitely something I would consider, and possibly bump this to the side deck. And then the final card is, of course, Guardian Chimera. Pretty straightforward and simple on that. I don't think, like, some of these extra decks change a little bit, but the idea is that I've kind of wanted to show the deck off to say, okay, I've gone back to basics, I've bypassed the Illusion Engine, and the deck still works incredibly well, and I still enjoy it. Moving on to the extra deck, just so you have kind of like an idea of what I was, like an example of what I was playing. I decided to have the Gimmick Puppet in the side deck as a like auto win button, because it's very rare that if you resolve the Gimmick Puppet, you're going to have to go out of your way to do so. But when you resolve it, unless your opponent is playing a full-on control build or a control deck, you've pretty much got the win. Double Nibiru, just one of the ones where a lot of people, sometimes people get a little bit lapsical, and what I mean by that is like, okay, no one's playing Nibiru this format, I don't need to worry about it, and then you side in Nibiru and it's like, bam, take a giant rock. And then there's decks like Heroes that could have very well made an appearance at the event where they can't play around it, and Nibiru is nearly an auto win button on that one. They can play through it a little bit more nowadays, but it just gives you that different option. Triple Droll and Lockbird, pretty standard on that. Double Cosmic Cyclone. I knew there was a Tratrix player at local, so I was like, this is going to be so much more better. This is like more beneficial for me than Duster, because then if they chain Arachnocampa, I can't deal with their back row, and it's just like, bruh, I can't destroy us. I did also, and this was a bit of a weird one, is I did decide to go with Tikaboo. The one time I saw it, or the one time I put it in, I misplayed it horrendously. And what I mean by that is I flipped Tikaboo on my opponent, so I bricked pretty badly. I had to set a Tragedy and set Tikaboo and pass. And they activated Holitia, and I chained Tikaboo. So I chained Tikaboo too late, because they were able to activate the Holotea, they were able to trigger the Sarah. Holotea still went to the grave because it would fizzle out because they were both plants. But then he was still able to special summon a Mellow from the deck to pop the Tikaboo. And I was like, bro, I messed that up big time. But lesson learned. And then I went with another auto win button in Eradicator and Evenly's. Board breaking, deal with, if I was up against Labyrinths, if I was up against Runics, anything like that was heavy spells or heavy traps, I had a way to deal with it. Honestly, I expect this card to get absolutely rinsed on the ban list, so I do not expect it to be a thing. And that's where I'd actually be quite happy to see this go, and I can be a little bit more experimental with other kind of cards for the deck, just to kind of see what works. But like you saw, that side deck, I would say, apart from like, I would say Tikaboo is probably the only card that was like local dependent, and maybe Nibiru. But everything else, I think, is a pretty standard go-to option on those. And that is it for the profile. I hope this is kind of giving you a couple of ideas in your own build. I know it's not anything too special. I feel Branded has been played near enough to death. Like, there's so many different options and there's so many different variations, which is quite cool. And it's kind of a video that I would like to look into as to what is the best engine, or what does each engine offer? What is its pros and cons? You've got the duality engine, you've got the super poly engine, you've got your thrust into fusion duplication engine. So you've also got the Nadir or the Dogmatica package as well, which really does give different angles to the deck. As a final note and reflection on the build, I do feel that I kind of took Ash for granted. And what I mean by that is I didn't really have much of a fallback apart from holding on to the Bestials and going a bit more control, hoping that I had Super Poly, or hoping that I opened up Fusion Deployment with Ash on Branded Fusion. There was one time where Branded Fusion did get ashed and I was able to activate Fusion Deployment, and I was then able to go Cartesia, and I opened up the Albaz, so I was able to make my play through that route, which that was absolutely fine, and that's why playing 3 Albaz was really, really good and did exactly what it needed to do. So with Branded, really do enjoy it. I do feel, and someone said this to me a while back, Branded, in their opinion, is probably the most balanced and fair competitive deck. What we mean by that is it's very easy to stop and it's very consistent to stop. However, the deck is still very powerful and competitive. I feel it's on the same line as Sword Soul, in my opinion, but I feel Sword Soul is a little bit unfair in the sense that it has a direct burn option. I know this can go into Masquerade, but Masquerade needs your opponent to do something, whereas with Sword Soul, you're just like, okay, cool, long one, burn for 1200, thinking. Whereas with Masquerade, you've got to go, right, Masquerade pass, and then you're hoping that they start doing stuff that burns away their life points, and then they don't have enough to kind of come back to clear the board and switch the damage over. Regardless, unless the ban list says something to Branded Fusion, and this is the other benefit of a deck like Branded, because it kind of sits under that radar. Like, it's not winning an event, like it wins like regionals and stuff like that, but it's not like really in the big public eye of this deck needs to be hit and stopped. I'm hoping it will skate through the ban list quite nicely. Regardless, really do enjoy the deck. I think it's a very, very cool deck still, and I can't wait to see how it does in the new format, hopefully with no changes to its build itself, and the Illusion engine is definitely something else to look into. But for now, thank you so much for watching. If you do like, comment, subscribe, share. Any questions at all, by all means, please put in the comments down below. I will be more than happy to answer them for you. But for now, as absolutely always, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.